Hi, welcome to another episode of the Curious Midlife Podcast. And today I have movement educator, lifetime dancer, but lifetime mover extraordinaire, Marlo Fiskin. So hi, Marlo, thank you so much for making time today and coming and being here. And we first met it was the Embodied Movement Conference online, and you were a workshop leader. And you took all of us through an extraordinary hour of movement. And Rafe Kelly was hosting the event. And I will never forget, because I followed along with what you do. And we'll talk about what you do and how you do it in your own way. And afterwards, I remember he was so honest and generous in what he shared. And he said, I followed you and I was moving in that way. And I've never felt so awkward and embarrassed in front of my kids and the way I was moving. And it really, so if anyone's going well, what the hell is this about? If someone doesn't know your work, there are so many ways that you move, and you have a very, for me, it's just the most refreshing freedom of how you move in your body and your relationship to your body, which allows you that freedom and vice versa. So where did your movement story start, and where are you now? Where is it going? But
yeah, I think it started when I arrived here on Earth. But I remember being 7 or so years old and running around the neighborhood and recruiting neighborhood kids to come over because I was going to costume them, choreograph a show, and it would be performed a few hours later. And so I was already just inviting people to come, be a part of my creation. I've got you. We can collaborate, but I'm running this thing. Come learn. Yeah. And then even as a young dancer, I started getting invited to teach the younger kids. As a maybe teenager, I was asked to instruct the 5-year-olds, the 6-year-olds. And then by the time I was 16, I was teaching dance as a job. And when I was 17 years old, I was preparing to go to college and started to think about what I want to do, and was pretty unsure of anything other than I had some dance related dreams. But I knew one thing for sure, and that was that it was important to me at the time to be, I'm using air quotes here, fit. And I felt like I want to be moving. I want to be taking care of my body at 17. I just had a lot of clarity around that. And so I started studying for my ACE group exercise exam, which is our, in the United States, one of the predominant, certifications. And you have to be 18 to take it. So right after my birthday, I took it. And then I took my personal training exam, and I sent a VHS tape of me teaching a dance aerobics class to the University of Miami, where I had been accepted. It was like a workout video that I made at home using some other children in the
I just want to
hired me.
Is it really normal for a 16-year-old to become a teacher, to already be teaching?
No.
It sounds a bit I've not heard that kind of story before.
Sometimes there are, some kind of exceptional dancers that become very known when they're young and in Los Angeles in the dance scene. And you'll have some really young names. I wasn't famous by any means. I mean, we didn't use the internet then, the way we do now, but I just was incredibly dedicated, and it was what else would I be doing? There was nothing more appropriate for me to be doing than teaching and sharing. And my dance teachers in high school, they would often turn to me for ideas, just whether it was choreography or doing something different in class that day, because it just came so naturally. It was the language I speak was this ideation around movement and trying things differently, and asking, why are we doing it like that?
I love
because it seems like that's a strange choice considering what I understand the reasoning is. So have not stopped that since then, ever.
and have you always had a kind of musicality with your movement as well?
I suppose so, but I think we all have that. We just lose touch. As infants are musically responsive, young children don't have difficulty moving to the beat, most of them. Of course, some people have differences that make that more difficult, but you watch kids and they don't have trouble moving to rhythms until it's been, removed culturally from what they're practicing, or they're not around rhythmic music, or it's discouraged. So I just never stopped. Sometimes people ask me too about, my range of motion or my ability to squat very easily, and I'm like, well, I never stopped. I used to eat dinner squatting on the stool for my entire life. I didn't sit in a chair. I squatted on the chair, and my mom would try to ask me not to. She was concerned about my manners. She said, if you ever were to
social hierarchy of
if I was ever to dine with royalty, she'd say, I was like, well, that's not happening. I'm going to keep squatting.
But and I always give the parkour example of, you're walking along the road as a kid, and if there's a little wall, it's far more interesting to walk on the top of that wall than to walk on the pavement or the sidewalk. And it's kind of like, walk nicely. And so you didn't sit nicely, you just squatted nicely.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And never stopped.
Yeah.
And never stopped. Yeah. So yeah, that's as I look at some of those earlier things I was doing in childhood, it is the same as what I do now.
Yeah.
I've just read a lot more books.
And did you have were you in an environment of movers? Are you come from a family of movers, or is this just the Marlo thing?
Yeah.
It
wasn't my family, really. It was not my family. I was encouraged though. So I was, lucky to have parents that saw my passion.
This girl squats and moves.
Yeah. And providing me opportunities to further my dance education and training in some really great ways. But I went to a dance studio, and then in high school I went to a high school for dance, which I still don't really have words to. Yeah, it's like fame to express how amazing it is to get shipped off. You go to a regular school in the morning, so you do your typical subjects, and then you get put on a bus with the arts kids sent to this other school where you get grades for improvisation and ballet and modern and Pilates. I got an A in Pilates in 10th grade.
Amazing.
So
that exists. What an education model.
Incredible. Yeah. And it was within the public school system. It's not most places, but we have one here in Virginia.
Wow.
So,
that's cool. Yeah. And then
I go back.
because you're beyond dance now, or there is dance, but there's this flow, and you do groundwork and you do pole, and you're a massive nature fan. So I was like, oh, this is all the cool movement stuff. How did those worlds evolve to what? And can you explain kind of what you do now for people who maybe some of my people aren't aware of you yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat hard to summarize what I do now, because I do work with people who right. I work with people who of wildly different abilities, and help them with where they are and with what they're comfortable with, find more continuity, find more play, find more focus and movement. So for some people, that's shifting your weight side to side, or using walking as a way to start to engage more with rhythm, or with letting more parts of your body move more freely. Some people I'm teaching acrobatics, doing wild things in the air. But so but I'm really interested in helping people find sustained focus with their movement practice, and to be able to shed a lot of the ideas about rights and wrongs of movement that tend to hold us back. And to some extent, people who've had a lot of training are also at a disadvantage, because they've heard a lot of messaging about right, wrong in terms of technique for things, where then people who haven't moved, they've heard a lot of messaging maybe about why they shouldn't or why they can't. And so for everybody, there's a lot of learning to focus more on what you are feeling in that the present moment in order to access flow, which could be outside, could be to music, could be mountain music.
And I
A lot
think
of it is on Zoom.
yeah, yeah. And that unlearning piece of people who are like, but I've done it this way and my body knows this. And like, well, I can't do that. You can't, no, because it has to happen like this. And those unlearning movement patterns and ideas and ideologies, I think are really, I know when I had to like unlearn a swimming technique, I had to unlearn my kind of like power stroke into this really floaty glide, and I can't think the name of it right now, which is really silly. And it took me like 30 hours of going from like, I'm this really like competent, strong, splashy swimmer to this other technique, which was just like you glide. And I remember getting to the middle of it going like, well, now I can't swim competently in either like methodology. I'm just in this like bleh kind of state. And then it's like, no, go through it. And then it was like, oh, okay, now I'm in the glide. Now I can like ocean all day and never get tired. Yeah, so the
and it can be uncomfortable, right?
Really
Well, if you feel like unlearning, and I might even explore some language that I sometimes use, like we're trying to help people have more options or develop choicefulness, because sometimes the discomfort of changing what you're doing is around a notion that what you were doing is wrong. Now that you're confronted with new information, right? There's some friction. There's like a fight against the old and the new. And that doesn't really create the conditions in the body somatically for change. So instead, looking at, all right, you got that. Can we expand this aspect of it? Can we have a little bit more freedom in this part? Or could you keep doing what you're doing there, but then we're going to just start to change this aspect of it? And it's just expanding a thing that's already there, which might completely transform it and morph it into something new, but it's not a fight against what you did before and what I'm asking you to do now.
This noble crusade of like, I was so wrong and this is so right. It's like, your body and it can move and be friends with it. And what are the kind of themes that you see across your work and how you approach it?
Ooh, good question. Themes across my work.
Or what do you find yourself drawn to constantly? Like, what are the constants that pull you towards, that really resonate for you?
One is helping people access a state, a quality of springiness and sponginess in their movement.
I like
and that is no matter what it is that you want to be better at. If you know how to create like a full body, spongy springiness, you're definitely going to be doing something good for your fascial system, for your coordination, but it's also like the marker of youthful movement. Is someone who still has their spring, right? They still have like fluid, they still have gush when they move. And so a lot of my classes begin with creating some bounce in the body, which doesn't necessarily mean jumping, but I do teach people how to jump gradually. Often even within pole, when people maybe envision themselves as they want to be a really smooth mover, they don't realize that the ability to produce power in a coordinated way, like the ability to jump, is what's going to allow you to be smooth also as you transition in that way. So that's something that's there a lot. Finding bounce in the body. I also liken that to, if you have a sticky lock on the door and you put the key in, sometimes you need to just shake it around and shake it in different angles. And so it's such a good way to wake up tissues, find your sticky spots rather than addressing it through yanking or just a sustained position. Find, can you wiggle it? That's a big question for me, is like Marlo first. Okay, can you wiggle that part of your body? Because that's going to tell us a lot about your ability to connect to it quickly. So those are interesting for me.
Yeah, and I like it. And so the workshop you ran in that conference, you had us wiggling. You had us doing a lot of hip movement that was very undulating. And there was a sensuality to it. And you talked a little bit about that. And some of your movement, people could look at and be like, wow, this woman's like naked, isn't it? Is that a kind of sexy thing? Or, people just could like really simplify. And you took us through a guided kind of 10, I think it was like 10 or 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just extraordinary. And how did that theme evolve, and how is that still evolving to you? Because so many people, and I see this in both, like I work with mainly middle-aged women, but a friend of mine who works with men as well, like he's always just like, men and their hips, my God, like this reluctance to move this part of our body seems to be omnipresent. It's either like some overly sexualized interpretation of it, yet it's a very connected piece of us to do these things. So I don't even know where I'm even going with this. It was just like, this is what I remember of doing that, of going through how you guided us into moving.
Mm-hmm.
And it just felt beautiful in a way to have this kind of very freely expressive feeling in my body when I did it that isn't normally there when I'm kind of maybe moving on the floor or as part of a movement practice.
Yeah. That particular talk was around modeling permission around that the way that we move or we allow other people to witness us moving is going to give other people permission to start to mirror that. That, and so we did a lot of patterns of weight shifting that are really like localized in the pelvis. It's like swinging hips, front, back, side, circles with level changes. And it's another sort of a theme or approach that I work with often is localizing our attention to a region of the body for a long period of time, even while the full body might be in motion. So like we could stand and be really still and just do hip circles, and that could be a really illuminating process, but we can also do any movement and keep our focus localized on a part of the body. It could be pelvis, it could be the tips of your fingers. That's another one that I work with a lot because people are adept usually at moving their hands. They communicate with their hands and use them all day long, but then when it comes to movement, it's like the lights go out in the hands and they can become really unenlivened pretty rapidly as people try to focus on something else. So whatever the access point is, hands, hips, can we keep paying attention to it? Can you notice and track the pathways of movement that you're making? So hips just kind of awaken us to many things. But I don't think I've ever heard after doing a several minute, 5 minute, 10-minute hip movement thing, somebody say that they feel worse in terms of stiffness, or they feel I don't know, like anything that tends to come up after movement that's too jarring, like feeling sharp or like sticky, any of those things, because it's gentle. We're not going to hard stops. Sometimes when people do, I'll say cat-cow kind of patterns, they've trained themselves to go to end ranges and stop there. That's a really common approach to range of motion, or it's just like go to the end. And instead I'm like, actually, I want you to like kind of stay away from the bumpers of the ends and find the ranges of motion that you can have continuity, ease, and that your movement is not interfering with your ability to breathe. If you're moving bigger than you can breathe, I'd like you to move smaller and focus on that. And what happens, is it starts like one of the metaphors I gave was like if you had a broom hanging from your underpants between your legs, you're sweeping it back and forth.
It was like
So I give a lot of external metaphors to help people just get a part moving. So if you imagine that you had a scrub brush on each butt cheek and you had to scrub the wall behind you, it's a little different than just saying stand there and circle your hips. It's a more vivid, it can give us a different orientation and intention. And it's the play. It can also be
I was gonna say my brain reacts so much more to like, oh, I can do the wall brush.
Yeah.
And I'm not thinking
right.
about, it's so interesting, like how our brain perceives these words and these ideas and these associations and the connotations to, like, okay, you need to go in a circle. And a circle is or like go like side to side, but like clean the wall, like, or brush the floor. There's more openness to interpretation within that. And how
we can get open, and then higher degrees of specificity too, which is in sometimes counterintuitive for people. Part of getting closer to a flow state is actually getting really, really specific about what you're doing, because giving people more permission, like move however you want,
do whatever you want,
surefire way, is terrifying.
Don't know what to do. Right? Yeah, way too big.
But if it's make a grapefruit sized circle, or that's grapefruit isn't the right thing for a circle, a teacup plate, pick your dimension, 6 inches size circle. And then you have also like a degree of effort. If you have to scrub something that has some grit to it at that dimension, is very different than having like a fine watercolor type bristle brush with trailing movement, like wispy versus grinding, different levels of effort, the body's going to move differently. And so sometimes the imagery can get hyper specific, and there's actually it's freedom in that, and it's easier for people to know what to do. The goal becomes clearer within the
I mean that element of your workshop, like, it was a trip. It was like, it was hard to kind of talk afterwards. It was like I wanted to stay in this dreamy movement freedom place. And it was like, okay, this is a whole world of movement that so many people aren't having in their movement life. There's the exercise and the fitness and all that stuff, and then like, where's the play gone? Where have we lost that, and where can that come in and find balance with all of it? Because can you share like how in a week of Marlo's life, what kind of as a fly on the wall, what kind of movement things would be happening in 1 week?
Yes, well, that definitely depends on where I am in the world. I'm my mother's caretaker, and so I'm in Virginia Beach. When I'm here, I go to a local gym most days, and I float about in the gym to areas that have a bit of clearance, a bit of space, and I would do everything from really, I'm going to call it generic strength training, like the classics, high load strength training, to things that to many people look probably completely inexplicable. And that's because I'm sensing my fascial web. So as I'm moving, I'm listening to music. So there's a response to sound, but I am saying, like, can I feel my skin alive throughout my entire body, and not allowing myself to fall into like stagnation. And I'm changing the tones and the speeds of my movement to, in response to things that I notice, like, ooh, there's some stickiness there. And so that area is going to respond better with some like some bounce, or maybe like some really slowing down in order to melt. So you could call it like intuitive movement, but I don't think that that's really right, because I'm responding to some very clear felt sense.
It's a conversational movement.
It's responding to what's there. So that can also, people go like, sometimes they ask me, they're like, what are you doing? Like, is that Tai Chi? They look at, I think that it registers maybe as I'm not performing, and a lot of people's association with dance, even though I wouldn't, this is not my opinion, is that it like is a performative aspect to it, and that's not what's going on when I'm doing that. If I had full access regularly, I'd be pole dancing a lot too, because that's one of my happy places.
Because I saw today you did a movement thing in the gym that was about avoiding mosquito bites. And,
yes.
And this looked like an incredible movement practice.
Yeah, and it was real. It's real. So yeah, I think the truth is right, this period of my life is, there's a lot of not ideal circumstances happening, like the caretaker role geographically where I am. I don't have my movement community. I'm not around people that move like I do or could push me. And I don't even have a training space that really affords me like privacy. I don't have a place where I can put on the music on the system and then just go. I'm on a little carpet corner in my bedroom here. And yet I need this.
Yeah.
So I also outside, like there's beautiful trails around me. And so I'm sometimes moving outside. There are a lot of mosquitoes at this time of year. So you really cannot stand still.
Nope, you got to move. You've got to move.
Yeah. But it is a lot of just responding to the circumstances of the place. Another thing I did today is I grabbed a 4-pound medicine ball, and I try to test out different things in the gym that I even realized, like, this gym that's here, I have gone to on and off since I was a teenager, and there's things that I've never touched. Like there's machines that I've never touched. And people looking at me would probably be like, this doesn't look like a person who uses machines, but I'm like, why not? And of course, sometimes I do silly things on them, but I also like, what can I learn about my moving body by engaging with this thing that somebody made? Like, and so I want to play with all the toys.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, 4-pound ball.
Yeah. And I think also, like, as a movement educator, people presume that, you're in this perfect setup all the time. Whereas what you're doing now is closer to most people. Like, there are less than optimal circumstances. There are higher responsibilities. There are time constraints, geographical constraints, all these other things. And people don't necessarily have an idea of like, well, how do I fit it in, and where do I go, and what do I do? Or whereas you're open and curious to movement in different places, and whether it's what is that weird machine in the gym in the corner, like I've never seen anyone on it, I don't know what it does, like, okay, let's go and say hello, let's play on that. And because that's been your movement is a language that you operate within, and feeds you, and is nourishing. And some people, I think, they want to be there. They're like, how can I get that? How can I get that? Because I'm a caretaker right now, and I have a really small space, and I have this, and some of these other options for them of some, more mainstream fitness or traditional things just don't resonate. Like, I always think, I say, like, movement is like an instrument. Like, it's like music. Not everyone has to be a drummer. You can be a violinist, you can be a flutist, you can play the harp. Maybe you need to be in an orchestra, or maybe you just want to like play the bagpipes and do a war cry. Like, your movement is a part of you that has to be in the world and can connect you to the world. And I know when I'm actually visiting my mum at the moment, and so I like walk over and I go on the moors and I hang from trees and I do stuff, and it's raining a lot, whereas I'm normally living in a place which is really sunny a lot. And so it's like, oh, okay, got to get used to back to like, oh, okay, train in the rain. Okay, it's nice. Like, I get wet, it's okay. Then I get dry, it's okay. It's like, okay. Like, probably should have bought more than one pair of shoes with me, but okay. Or it's raining, so well, I can just take my shoes off because my feet dry really quickly. My feet dry far quicker than my shoes. Just wear the feet. So So yeah, just to say, I think it's always really interesting for people to see the movement educators and teachers and their peers, how they adapt, rather than presenting life as like, well, I just do this every day. And it's like, well, we don't always have the like, you know, you want your pole. You're like, you're missing your pole. So it's like, okay, what feeds you in other ways to do those things. So what are your kind of go-to play areas? What kinds of movements happen in those play areas?
Well, you know, if I'm listening to music, there's such a response to what I hear. And so it's almost like the first play area is the sound environment that I'm in. That will tremendously shape what I'm doing. But you know, open spaces are great, but I also love to, like, if there's a tree that I could like climb on and up, and playgrounds. I walk on the beach at night, or not at night. It's a sunset every day. Lucky to have that right here, and stop and do various undulating things and continue on my way. Yeah, so inside, outside, anywhere, but sometimes it's, you know, really not ideal. Almost sometimes I'm on the road and it's like I have a hallway, or some hotels you go to and what they call a gym.
That's interesting.
Like,
sometimes. That's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes it's sometimes interesting in a very unappealing kind of way. And so, you know, make do with it, or make do otherwise. Like, I went into one gym I was in, and I grabbed some of the elastic resistance bands, you know, and it just like broke, snapped in half. And I was left with like a handle and a little tiny piece of elastic, and I tied a knot on it, and I clenched the knot betwin my feet and was using the handle.
Make it work.
Yeah. So I mean, to some extent, I actually was thinking about this morning. I'm like, I like embrace the comedy of shitty circumstances.
Yeah, I like that.
Because like,
what you gonna do? What you gonna do?
What am I gonna do?
Like, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And I do want to say, like, it has helped me actually have social media, and like the being able to film a thing and then like create this moment or this meme of it actually helps me remember that. Because I could get really stuck in the of my own first reaction or response. Yeah.
Like, where are the real weights? Like, it's not heavy enough. Like,
yeah. Like, what does the playful version of me respond? How does it respond to this? So yeah.
That's cool. And in terms of your relationship with nature and how that affects your movement, is it just omnipresent? Is it something that you kind of go to, or it's just something like, what role does that play in your world, in your finding ease and peace, and you being at home in your body and in your skin, mentally, emotionally, physically?
Yeah. The first image that came to mind was that I did spend a lot of time in water when I was growing up and when I was young, swimming pools, oceans, and I actually started scuba diving illegally when I was 10, and I did a lot of scuba. And
that's really
one of the things I would would love to do.
It's supposed to stunt you. It didn't stunt you.
No, go in very shallow water, like 15 feet, which is pretty shallow for scuba, and just sit there and like feel the water moving my arms, and just watch things. And even the dive masters would comment like, you don't use like any air. And I was just so relaxed and kind of tranced out by watching the crabs moving and feeling myself in water. And I know that those experiences and even wind on my skin is something that I can connect to as an embodied memories, that if I want to move in those ways at any moment, I have those to call upon. But I do I really like dancing in forests. Like finding a wooded area, putting some music on, or not. Sometimes I'm doing it without sound as well, but that comes more into like a sort of an energy play type of movement that I'm not going to call it Tai Chi or Qigong, which I have done some of. It's like inspired by that, but it's really a reaction to that environment and my being part of that web at that time.
And you
But
seem like
yeah,
no,
go ahead.
as I said, you're a very attuned listener to what is happening around you and within you and how you contribute to that. Like to be at that young age, to have an awareness of the wind on your skin. Whereas some people may have to they could find that, but they'd have to really travel back or be like, well, I guess, yeah, I used to really like standing in the shower for 20 minutes, just the water on your face, or realizing oh, actually one of the things I loved about, going on a walk every Sunday was actually being able to run down the tour afterwards and lose your legs and just be and have that freedom in momentum as kind of as you go. And you talk about it as though you were very articulate and very aware and very carefully listening and feeling from a really young age, and kind of continue to nurture that, this listening. And is that something that you bring very intentionally into what you do and invite others to do as well?
I think that it just is everything that we've been a part of is influences our work and what I present. But I notice that sometimes when I'll speak about other people and then how I view it, we try to bring in imagery from nature into their movement. Sometimes, again, it's lacking specificity in a way that it's not particularly helpful. So people will say I want to move like water, it looks like they're moving like water. And that's actually a very difficult thing to do.
I always think, well, what kind of water are we talking?
Right. Well, exactly. What kind of water are we talking? What, and what state is the water in? And we, most people would say, have you been water? Have you felt that you are water at some point? And most people are probably not going to give you a yes, but people have had experiences with water or in water, right? Sliding your contact, your foot or your fingers on an inch of water that creates a spray, right, is different than even being in waist high water that has some movement to it versus being completely submerged. And so those specifics can be really helpful for if somebody's guiding themselves, and if I do reference or create a world for people, I usually don't start with having to imagine anything, but I build them into this connected to the natural world experience, but starting with what is undeniably here right now. So for example, if somebody is standing and I have them feel that the weight of their body travels until it's 100% in the balls of their feet, and then slowly over 8 counts bring their weight back until you feel that it's entirely in your heels, and we feel that really slow journey from front to back, and you have enough suppleness in your knees and ankles, and you might start to let one foot and then the other lead. We started with what you could feel right now, which is your feet on the floor that you're on, but through tempo and intention and tone, we start to drop into a water space, a watery quality of movement. And then once somebody already has that, whether it's a more of a, like a kind of windy whipping responsiveness in their body, or like a being blown is ultimately still like something is moving you, points of initiation. And then I bring in the nature specific imagery once people are already moving that way, rather than using it as the invitation, because that can be harder to access. It's like it might be asking a little too much theatrically for people.
Yeah.
At first.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about your relationship with the floor and movement on the floor and being on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I always loved anything in a dance class that involved groundwork, and it wasn't a big part of the dance forms I did growing up. But then I found myself more and more drawn to forms that use the floor, and contemporary and more postmodern dance forms have really, they've now using a lot of more and more floor work. But I something that I think, and besides my personal enjoyment being on the ground, I just was so clear that it's a place to bring people into the experience of their body moving with less difficulty than if they're standing. So when you can connect with something, there's a felt sense of safety often. If somebody's willing to be on the floor that they're working with, like if it's not gross to them, if they have a floor that they're willing to be on, we can really give the floor our weight. And you can give the floor your weight more and more and more. And it's an incredible experience to realize just how much holding we're doing that is unnecessary. And that the subtlest action, like if I'm laying on my back with one knee bent and I just push into the floor with my big toe, if I am relaxed, it'll create a ripple of motion up through the entirety of your spine. You can really feel kind of exit out to the crown of your head. So as a way to awaken people to more subtle movement and the connection within the body in a way that's largely a matter of being more at ease and doing like small pulsing interactions with the ground. So I teach a program called Floor Flow, and often we do long sets of movement. Sometimes it's 40 minutes have gone by and I've just guided them through a few things. And as the music comes to a close there, I'll often let them know like that was 40 minutes. And people turn to me aghast. Yeah. Like they thought it was 15. And so, but it's floor work can be very settling and very grounding, but I don't do it in a sleepy way. And some people have encountered being on the ground things that put them a little bit more like you might accidentally fall into nap time, which I think there's plenty of reasons for that. Advocate for that as well. But we can turn up, we can turn up the effort, we can turn up the volume and the movement through space and spinning and beginning to make things acrobatic, or we can just like smear and undulate. And what a tremendous thing to remember that we can do, because if getting going feels difficult, if like the movement practice that you had intended to do, it's just like hard to get going, and you lay down on the floor and don't stop moving for 5 minutes. Don't stop. Then just small shifting side to side, rocking, lift a little, fall back down. Usually people find some more resource to keep moving. And then for those people that, if they don't, I'm like, that's how you really do need to rest.
Yeah.
It's a good test.
Absolutely. And I was saying just before we started how I meet so many people, or I'm in conversation with people who everyone knows that, okay, exercise is good for you. I want to age well. I want to be stronger, but I also want to have this consistency and a sustainable movement practice. And they've got chronic fatigue, but they're going to CrossFit and they're not thriving. It's the wrong fit. And so many people who I had a friend, and she was like, oh, I don't miss boot camp on a Sunday. And when she told me like what was happening at the time, I was like, I just think you need to lie down on the floor. Like sometimes when I hear about what people are doing, I'm just like, I would be exhausted if I did that. And I'm in a really well, healthy state, but I would never dream of doing those things. I would be like, well, I would go for a walk, and then I would be spending time on the floor if I wasn't sleeping. And if I had those stressors in my life, like if I had stressors A, B, C, D, E, F, G, there is no way that I would be adding stressors, you know, PQRST. It was like, that's the overwhelm for our systems. And I think the ground is such a nice place to meet yourself and kind of go, I can't cheat my body into or persuade it. Like it speaks so loudly, or so not loudly, but it speaks very clearly, very succinctly, I think.
Yeah.
When we're on the floor, there's nowhere to hide on the floor.
Yeah, there's a lot of things are revealed that we can feel our impact or lack of impact as we shift. If you shift from one side of your body and you observe that it's kind of thunking, or a large chunk of you is coming down at once, rather than being able to turn the surfaces of your body into like rounded, smushy descents. And even parts of our body that we might sometimes perceive of as pretty straight, like a forearm, or a shin, they're not. And depending on how you're organizing your body, you can like curve every surface of yourself down into the floor so that everything rolls. And that's such a nice thing to pay attention to, especially if when trying to pay attention to yourself and to your own movement is challenging for one reason or another, is unpleasant, unsavory to pay attention to your own body movement. You can pay attention to how are you contacting the floor? Like, what's the floor experiencing? What's the floor? Where's the floor getting weight, and can you give it some weight somewhere different? And so those are nice ways to reframe when you're working with something where you have so much contact like that.
Yeah, and I think this feedback, and then also you mentioned earlier about your approach to breath work and making the movement smaller. So where does the breath come in for you in this movement world?
Yeah, I don't tend to do any movement where I'm giving prescriptions around breathing, but I help people realize that both in breath and movement, there's so much choice when we pay attention to it. And it can be reorganized and modulated, and tempos and volumes and emphasis can change. And so sometimes when it is a little bit more structured, I will have people play with like emphasizing different parts of their movement that will correlate to them breathing that way. So we could like emphasize and exhale by moving more sharply, or finding moments where we are having, small breath holds by doing more suspensatory. Is that a word? Sounds good. Sounds like a word.
Now,
Suspended. I like it. Suspended. Yeah, movement. Because I really think that separating things from their context, it's harder for people to make the real life applications. Like when our work is really, there maybe needs to be some particular retraining of breath or rehabilitation of movement or breath, but I'm most interested in where can we play with it in a way that people are reminded of their access to choice outside of their movement practice. It's not because like, oh, we were dancing then. No, like we're practicing having more choices. Yeah.
And I think to go back to this idea of the springy and the bounce and the squish, one of the nicest things someone said to me after working with me was like, I've got the spring back in my step. I was like, oh, this is that says everything of the energy, the attention, the awareness, and how we feel in a body that can have choices, that isn't limited. And where for you do you feel that transfer the most in everyday life of
transfer from
of what you play within your movement world, in your like intentional movement practice, and the things that you're observing of how those show up or transfer into everyday life, even though a lot of your everyday life is moving, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I mean,
or
I think I'm more like struck by the moments that I've detached from an awareness of my body. Like I'm like, whoa, that just happened. I really lost track.
Like, where did I go? A little bit.
Yeah, because it's not the home base. There's usually, there's many decades of my life.
So the converse, like the opposite side of that question was going to be, do you have that times of where you're overly still, or do you experience the disconnect? And then is it kind of a shock?
It's just like dips, and I'd usually be like, oh, I was on my phone editing a video and I realized that my thumbs are aching, and I haven't moved. So it's usually like an embarrassing injury related to editing videos on your phone. But well, what it's always striking without had, like everyone, things come up, injuries, imbalances come up, and some of them can be, really mystifying, as it is for most people. And especially when you're like, I think I know my body so well, and you have somebody else look at you, right? And what they're telling you is going on is the complete opposite of your felt experience. Lots of people know what I'm talking about. You're like, what are you thinking? That's my tight side or whatever. And you're like, nope, that's actually so I've been and trying to reorganize around some injuries that have happened. It really requires continually paying attention to where I'm bearing my weight in my feet, and like pelvic relationship to my feet, because sometimes it's in movement assessments I'm like, do still very well, but then there's something that's not working right, and that requires that I'm tracking what am I doing like all the time. So I'm really interested in not having a hip replaced before it would be incredibly necessary. I've done now 2 cadaver dissection labs and seen a couple hip replacements, and
when you see
I'd look it's wow. Wild, shocking, like,
or when you see, I've had the chance to I was actually filming and doing photography for John Sharkey and Joanne Avison and the Biotensegrity Network, and these dissections. And when you see like, okay, this tiny scar on the surface, and then you see like what is happening like 8 inches below the surface.
Although it's from what they say, people tend to walk away like, wow, I'm feeling a lot better now. So I'm not making it anti hip replace for anti surgery, but it's more like, let me not wear my stuff out sooner than needs to be. And I have some damage. I was a professional dancer, and I was exploiting maximum ranges of motion. I was at one point like a international pole dance champion, US champion. Like, doing that requires pushing past healthy.
I was going to say,
you have to push past healthy.
That's how you win. It's not a health first approach to movement.
No.
And when you're in the
not
really,
it's not at all.
And
so I've been there. I know what that's like.
And I think this health first approach to movement, of like movement for life and having movement in your life, but a movement life, people are kind of sometimes still really drawn to, like, I'm really lucky. I'm not competitive, even self-competitive in my movement. I'm really just like, have fun with it. I really, and I don't really know exactly where that came from, but it seems to be serving me really well.
Yeah.
Where a lot of the elites I know, they're like, they don't do so well as the years go by, or there's a lot of undoing of these extremes that where movement was not in balance and not in that happy place, kind of in their body. And then also I've met a lot of people who, when they reach those championships things, it's so deeply the performance recognition is so deeply tied into their identity that when they can't be as good as what they used to be, there's a like, well, I'm not going to do it because I can't do the things I used to do.
Yeah.
And so then comes in the why of the movement, the why of who you are in your body in those relationships. Have you had to kind of navigate those things, or are you just on a different?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I've had some injuries that completely changed what I'm able to do, like a back injury that dramatically impacted how much lumbar extension I have. You know, I used to be able to like put my chin on the floor and my feet beside it, and like,
okay.
you know, nowhere near that after a particular injury. And there is there's always pain that comes along with that, like change of identity, especially if some of the work I was getting was like I would be asked to come teach, or perform because there was an association with me being able to do those things. But it, though, I think like has fueled me wanting to be like as well rounded as I could possibly be as a movement educator, or like what it means to coach people, which is different than teaching how to do things. And it's, it's really pushed me to be, excellent in other ways.
Yeah. And what a beautiful journey. And where are you heading? Where are you on your journey right now?
I've been focused a lot over the last year of teaching teachers. Particularly, I was working with pole dance teachers and people who would like to guide other people into flow state with movement through like floor flow teacher training.
Yeah.
And I still feel like there's so much that I would like to put together into something that I can present around particularly language in the body. So that's programs related to cueing. One of my specialties is being able to, with very accessible, understandable language, be very technically precise. So giving something that makes sense in terms of how the body functions, but in a way that people don't have to, it's like a kind of detour around it, looping around in your brain. Like, what are the words that speak to the body, as like visceral responses. And so I love that area. So creating some I could call it like a membership for teachers related to pole, related to movement. Yes.
Oh,
in
man.
general.
Yeah. That's exciting. Do it.
Coaching other movement educators and figuring out their offers. Like I'm a business mentoring for people, as people have training, in a couple different things, and they're trying to figure out what their unique spin is it. And we do some, language and positioning wizardry to help them figure out what they're all about, what they offer, and how that can show up in the classroom. Like, how can the classes you deliver be utterly unique? That, and then eventually I just want to have airports calling me up and asking me to help design the play space. I mean, that's like the big goal. Is kind of.
Can adults go and play in those soft rooms? I'd really like that.
Usually not. Usually you have to be accompanying, right? I know one of those.
But like, I mean, we have our play spaces.
Please. So really that, like, advocating for, I call it movement positivity, is just changing spaces so that right now we have like a deficit around movement, but equal to giving people more options for how they move, really prioritizing also accessibility, because we have like a real problem for folks with disabilities not being able to move through space with ease. And then we also have that the movement options have been flattened and removed to the point that it's taking away from people's capacities. And so I'd really love to do some consulting or some advising in public spaces, private spaces, outdoor spaces, to just look at how we can use the environmental cues to invite people and remind them of their options, and perhaps very obviously skip from here to here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think these
so
invitations are missing. Yeah. And I think like I have friends in Denmark who are both like, you know, they started to train as architects or they're architects and designers, but they're also movers, and then they became really elite movers, and then how that informed these temporary public interactive art spaces. That's what they were categorized as. But they were, and then other populations would be like, well, that's a parkour park, and or that's a dance performance space, and that's that. But to have, I think the movers need to be in the conversations with the architects, with the designers, with building regulation people of, because there's, you know, if we look at the fitness industry, it's, you know, what, I don't know, $16 billion or something. And yet the population as a whole is moving less, is having worse mental and physical health, is doing this. So there's something off. There are conversations that aren't happening, or the range of what can happen. And I think for someone with such curiosity and these ranges of experiences that you have, like, I just think, like, so if anyone's listening to this, like, get her in.
Yeah.
Get the email, like, find her do it.
I love it. I mean, I've just done it very casually, where somebody's like, I'm opening a studio, and I'm like, let's talk about what people experience as they enter the space. You know, for example, if you do have a movement space, how do people know that they're safe there? Their different identities, like, is that being signaled? Is that what you want? And if not, why? And then also, like, what are people cued to do? Like, is it a movement space, and when you walk in, it's just totally chairs? Because people are going to sit in the chairs and be on their phones. And is that what you want? So what's somebody's vision for how people are going to feel in their movement spaces and in their movement classes? And you have to, like, build that experience from people, you know, before they're really entering the room. So I've just done that a little bit. But yes, please, if you own an airport or you design airplane seats, please, I need to talk to you.
I think, like,
I need to talk.
Yeah, and just sort out all the hotel chains as well. You know, like, whilst we're at it, really, they could benefit from, because I feel like, you know, there's now this world of, like, boutique hotels, or there's all these other things, and yet the kind of gym or exercise space I don't feel it's evolved across any hotel.
And or even just in room, a basic amenity to me should be a bar that people can reach. A bar that people can reach, and or that there's, like, a ring that's hanging down from it that people could reach if they were not able to reach it. You know, that's, like, to me, right, a basic. Is there something for people to hang their weight from? So,
and is there floor space to do to just roll on the floor? Can you roll, like, it's funny, when I go into people's houses, I always, like, look around, I'm always like, where's
I saw this furniture here.
Yeah, like, what's with all the tables?
This house would be so much better if you got rid of all this furniture.
Yeah, or, like, you could just
I think that
move things to the side, or, like, because otherwise it's another friction point of it's not available to me. It's too much hassle. It's like that, or, you know, I like, the floor is really hard, or the table's in the way, and it's like, well, why have you got this giant chest of drawers? I don't know, like, what's this thing do? Like, what does the functionality of that bring to your life compared to the impact having a ring, a bar, or a space on the floor to move will have on your life in terms of form and function and future outcomes? Well, like, my t-shirts in these drawers, I'm like, I you know, that, like, t-shirts can be crinkly, they don't mind, but like your body, you don't want to be, that smoothness. So one final thing, sorry, I know we could talk way longer, but if people are listening to this and they'll be like, this woman sounds intriguing, and like, where does someone start with their movement? If someone's coming back, if someone doesn't trust their body right now, if someone's had pain, they've been aching, they're tired, they're just like, they look down, you look down at your legs and you're like, I don't even think they're mine. I don't even recognize my body. I don't recognize me in my body, how it feels and what it does and what it doesn't do.
Yeah.
Where
to start?
What are some
some starting points, right? Because there could be so many. I think one is knowing that that getting started is bound to be uncomfortable, and there's bound to be signals coming from within that are telling you to stop for one reason or another. Just know that that's gonna be like, have that as an expectation.
Like, it's gonna happen. Yeah,
it's gonna happen. Okay. But I do think that a little bit of a time frame, you could say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or I like for example, 2 songs, 2 pieces of music that can you do something repetitive and rhythmic for the whole song, and it's allowed to gradually change. But if, for example, I stand and I'm just like tapping my toes or tapping my heels on the floor, that's the only obligation, and you cannot stop for the whole song. It can morph. It can become something a little different. If you're like, oh, but my knees, okay, oh, my hips are moving a little more. But stay with your commitment. Because what sometimes happens is we start doing a thing and we get I want to be doing this other thing, and we jump to try to do this stretch, or we try to do this exercise that we have a memory of. And that practice, I think we'll want to see if we can notice those impulses and not follow them. And that's where you need a really strong commitment. So even if it is like, okay, you have tight shoulders, swing your arms, back and forth, or like cross and open, and put on one song and say, you're going to do that for the whole song, which means that you're going to do it in a way that's comfortable. You're going to do it in a way where it's able to breathe, in a way that's not going to fatigue you. All really important skills within movement. And if you're able to do movement repetitiously without fatigue, it's telling you you're working more with your body's like connective tissue system. And it's not so like maybe like effortful or sticky. So I think those are good. And starting with something, if you're somebody who wouldn't mind like passing a ball from one hand to the other, could you do that for a whole song? Yeah. Or hold a ball in each hand and do this with them. But that like a time constraint or an area of the body to pay attention to. My feet, I keep moving my feet. Sometimes I just have people step. I want you to step for a whole song, like keep stepping. And it's amazing to watch people realize how much they're wanting to stop, how much they're wanting to stop themselves. And I'm like, I'm not asking you to dance. I'm just asking you to step, like walk, but can just keep walking on the beat, just keep going. And it's beautiful. It's beautifully illuminating. And usually after you do that, you feel open to more.
Yeah.
I think rhythm is a great way to outsource attention a little bit, or not outsource, but like put the attention a bit outside of yourself. Like you have a responsibility to listen and to see if you can reflect the timing of what you hear.
I love that. Yeah. And I think this timing and tempo are something that for people not from dance or like I'm not from dance. I don't dance, and sometimes I dance in my own little dancey way, and I'm really happy with that. But this idea of tempo is missing. And like you say, we all had it, and it served a purpose. And we have so many internal tempos and as you're saying, like with the breath of, we can change tempo, we can change volume, we can change intensity. And I know I do some animal flow, and once it was kind of like, okay, I got vaguely competent at some of the basics. Now it's like, oh, now when we play with tempo, like I have a whole new practice. Like I've got
Yeah.
another, like, oh, I could just do 3 years just playing with this one idea, with this one thing, or just adding this as a variable and giving it time. And one of my parkour teachers, there was a thing we used to do as well, where they would say like, okay, you're just going to do this one step vault on this one thing, but you're going to do it for 20 minutes, just a step vault,
Yeah.
back and forward. And what happens with these repetitions is like your body's not the same at, at rep 30 seconds as it is at 4 minutes, as it is at 12 minutes, as it is at 20 minutes. And we used to do that as well with these really high repetitions. It would be like do 100 precision jumps, really small, and just and it would sometimes it would be like this big number of repetitions, and other times it would be like 20 minutes or 10 minutes. But this same idea of like, sometimes we give ourselves too much. Like I don't know, like what did you just do? Like I don't know, I'm tired. Like I was moving, I don't really know what I was doing. But when it's like, okay, for 20 minutes I just have to put like my hand there and my foot there and pass over and turn around, and I'm going to put my hand there and my foot there, over and turn around, and da da da, and da da da. And it's so many people, I think, don't play with those opportunities, and there's so much to get from them. And I love this scale of like this idea of the feet and the timing. So,
I mean, but it can even be like, your hands, and especially if you have strong feelings about an area of your body and how it moves, I wouldn't start there. Like if it is like, you can do this like water spraying, or do this with your wrists, and maybe your feet want to start to move. But if you already have if it's already loaded somehow, then that's not the part to start. Like, can you circle your fingers? I mean, I've never done this I actually already feel like, well, this
that would
would
be
actually
really
be really
that
hard.
would be really
Really
interesting. Like,
interesting.
oh wow,
Like,
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
I have done thumb circles, and it's cool. It's so cool because I immediately am learning
Like,
like, wow, there's some jagged
hi,
places on
hello,
there's so
yeah,
much to pay attention to.
yeah.
Every rep is a new experience. And that's why I love, repetition, not in the name of like training, but in the name of recognizing that there's something new to observe every
Every
single
move,
time you do it.
yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, every move is a new move. There is no repetition of a move, but even though you're repeating a move, you
Right.
could never, like, you can never surf the same wave. You can never do those things. And I mean, I'm just really excited for more like teacher training opportunities. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I want to get to a Marlo's world, like
Yeah.
that. And
Floor
that,
flow teacher training, spring
yeah,
2024. And then,
I need to
community
do that.
coming later this year. Yeah.
Yeah. And where can people find you? Where
Yeah.
are you available?
I make the most stuff for Instagram. That's at Marlo Fiskin. And then my website is flowmovement.net. Those are the main. I have an email list, send out some fun things sometimes.
That's
Those are the cool
cool.
places to start.
And
Yeah.
And are there like opportunities for people to do classes online or with you in person, or where your time
Right
energy
now,
going?
there's not any online classes, but I do have courses that are like due anytime. I have a course called the Spinal Flow Upgrade. So if you're somebody who feels like you'd like to be able to move your spine with fluidity, some creativity, that's a program that it's created as a 9-week program that will, if you've had some exposure to spinal waves or like circling your ribs, it can really take it to another level of
Amazing.
awareness and detail. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me and
No. And any
meeting your
final
people.
thoughts you'd like to share? Any just like what are the things that are always there that you're like, but that's really the thing, or just whatever comes up?
I just, if you can start to see every surface and object as something that you can interact with intention. I mean, for me, the word apparatus really resonates. Like the floor, the pole, a chair, they're all things that you can whittle with and play with. In that way, if we adopt that, the accumulation of movement over a day can be actually pretty large if you're in the habit of purposeful fidgeting and playing. And I use the phrase like constructive misbehavior. Allow yourself to be a little bit more naughty, because if you're more naughty, you're probably going to be moving better.
I love it.
So
yes, I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, the world according to Marlo, I love it. I'm signing up, and I'm going to be naughty, and I'm going to move with the apparatus. So thank you so much. And yeah, people can find you at Marlo Fiskin and on Instagram, and I will put everything in the show notes. So thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
I'm excited about your training. The Spring 24.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.